Almost 80% of UK rivers start in soggy moorland like this. These are the Plynlimmon Hills in mid-Wales, 740 metres above sea level. A wild, desolate area which is largely uninhabited. The west coast is just 20 kilometres away, so this part of the country gets the full force of depressions coming in from the Atlantic. It receives over 2,500 millimetres of rainfall every year, making it one of the wettest parts of Britain. The ground acts like a huge sponge hanging onto a large amount of the rain. The excess runs off. Trickles become rivulets, which then form a stream.
Here it is, the River Severn. It doesn't look like much now, but it's only just got started.
Fed by dozens of rivulets, the stream swiftly grows in size and power, cutting down through the landscape to form a V-shaped valley. And it's getting bigger all the time. It's also fast-flowing, which means it has a high carrying capacity, the ability to carry material that's been stripped from the land.
Some of the material carried by the river is dissolved in the water. Some is suspended in the flow. And some, like this rock, is dragged along the bed by a mixture of flow rate and gravity. All this load is the ammunition required to erode the landscape.
Even at the end of the summer, the river is already flowing at 1,000 litres per second. It makes a dramatic sight as it plunges over this waterfall, which is called the Severn Breaks Its Neck. There are several ways in which waterfalls are formed. The most common one is due to a difference in rock type. Where a strong band of rock lies on top of a weak band, the water falling will erode the underlying weaker rocks. After a while, the inevitable happens. Over time, the waterfall cuts back. Eventually, a gorge is formed. After the waterfall, the Severn's gradient soon flattens out, and it starts winding its way through agricultural land. In flat areas, rivers wander about, forming loops of all shapes and sizes on the valley floor. These are known as meanders. Although they all look different from above, they share the same common features.
As you can see, on the outside of the bend, where the water's moving faster, it's cutting into the landscape, forming that long cliff. But here, on the inside of the bend, where the water's moving much slower, all this stuff is being deposited.
The erosion has left a very small neck on the meander. If we strip the trees away and look at it from above, it's easy to see what will happen next. The fast-moving stream will continue to erode the banks on the outside of the bends. It also erodes the area around the meander's neck. Eventually, the river breaks through, cutting off the meander and forming an oxbow lake. After Shrewsbury, the river drops through the Iron Bridge Gorge and swings south. By now, the Severn is flowing at over 60,000 litres of water a second, and although the river's mouth is still over 100 kilometres away, it's only 30 metres above sea level. Surrounded by flat land, floods are a significant threat. In November 2000, heavy rains caused some of the worst flooding since records began. Many rivers, including the Severn, burst their banks, causing widespread disruption and damage.
In the past, people have been quite clever about avoiding these disasters. This is Worcester, and the cathedral and the old town are much higher than the rest of the city. That's because they've been built on a river terrace, out of reach of the floodwaters. Since then, the town has grown, and there's been nowhere else to go except down onto the floodplain closer to the river. These Victorian houses risk getting flooded every winter.
Building on a floodplain also changes the way the land works, a fact that isn't always understood. When rain falls on open countryside, the ground acts as a big sponge, soaking up a lot of the water. But when the land is built on, the paving and tarmac stop water seeping into the soil. Instead of the water ending up in the soil, it's swiftly drained through pipes into the river. That's okay in normal conditions, but when it's very wet, the extra runoff can tip the balance, causing a river to flood. The situation is really serious, and at the moment, no one seems to have an answer. South of Gloucester, the risk of flooding decreases rapidly because the river starts to widen and it quickly develops into an estuary.
It's one of the biggest estuaries in the UK. At this point, it's already 2 kilometres wide, and south of the narrow point where they built the bridge, it's even wider still. The river here is tidal and has the second largest tidal range in the world.
The difference between the high water mark and the low water mark can be as much as 15 metres. And when the tide is out, huge expanses of mudflats are revealed. Many rivers in the UK, like the Thames, the Humber and the Forth, end in a wide estuary, and they all present the same problem. You need a long bridge to get from one side to the other. Here on the Severn, there isn't just one bridge, but 2 that carry traffic between England and Wales. South of the crossings, the river becomes much deeper, which means ships can come in. This has attracted industry to the cheap land around the estuary, and the shoreline is chock-a-block with factories and dock facilities.
I'm just surrounded by industry. There's a smelting works over there, several chemical plants over there, an LPG and oil terminal down there, and just over here is a container terminal for import and export to all over the world.
500,000 cars pass through the port each year, and the £27 million refit of the neighbouring Portbury docks should ensure that traffic through the area continues to grow. By the time it reaches its mouth, the Severn is 13 kilometres wide. The river looks like the sea. Having started as a trickle in the Plinlimmon Hills, it has run 350 kilometres. And by the time it reaches the sea, it carries over 9 billion litres a day. Quite a transformation.